A horrific mass shooting on South Carolina's St. Helena Island, a politically charged land scandal at Clemson University. The days of our Congressman saga back in the headlines, and not in a good way. And fireworks and some transparency at the South Carolina State Election Commission. I'm Will Folks, the owner and founding editor of FITSNews.com. Welcome to another edition of Your Week in Review. So we're starting our show this week with news of one of the worst mass shootings South Carolina has seen in recent years. 4 people are dead, 16 others sustained gunshot wounds in a mass shooting on St. Helena Island in the South Carolina Lowcountry. Now, this is down in picturesque Beaufort County, one of the prettiest parts of South Carolina. But Jen Wood, the particular area where this shooting took place, there's been a lot of gang activity. There's been a lot of gang violence down there. And certainly those are where some of the signs are pointing as we start to look for what happened in the shooting.
Yeah, all indications are that they do believe that it was gang related. It's a beautiful, beautiful little area of the state. But St. Helena Island has been plagued with gun violence, drug trafficking, crimes, indictments recently. Similar to Colleton County, what we've seen in Colleton County, a lot of murders and gang activity and arrest and weapons charges. So, it's a very sad and scary, I think, time, and there have been no suspects arrested yet.
Yeah, Jen, they've talked about persons of interest, but as we film this today, no arrests made in connection with the shooting, no charges filed. But you mentioned Colleton County. We're talking about Beaufort County. There's a commonality there. These are 2 counties on South Carolina's coast. There's a lot of drugs coming in to the state through these 2 counties. They come in by water. They get moved up and down Interstate 95. Am I missing something here, Jen?
No, you're not missing anything at all. I think we saw a lot of those ties when we were looking heavily into the drug connections with Alec Murdaugh. And they persist to this day. There are, a lot of, the waterways. I mean, back in the 80s, we had Operation Jackpot. It's an ideal place to bring those drugs in from the ocean.
Yeah, that's one of the potential bigger pictures associated with this. I want to talk about another one in a minute, but before we do that, let's just get into quickly what happened, where did it happen, what limited context we know about this mass shooting.
Right. So it occurred at a bar called Willie's Bar and Grill, and located in St. Helena's a remote island, not a lot of businesses, but right near a Parker's convenience store. There was apparently some sort of class reunion for Battery Creek High School. It's a tailgate reunion. And there were approximately 700 people in the parking lot when the shooting occurred.
But this is not a school-sanctioned event or
Right. Beaufort County School District came out with a statement and said this was not at all a school sanctioned event.
okay, so this Willie's place is owned by a guy who's familiar to our audience, Willie
Yes.
Terrell,
Yes.
ran for a local position down there in Beaufort County and was doing pretty well, had a lot of endorsements, but then some news came out about his alleged criminal past, about some statements he'd made on social media that were a bit over the top. So a lot of that support dried up. He did not win that election. And this is his bar, though, where all this took
Yes,
place.
it is his bar, and he currently has 2 felony charges pending in Beaufort County as well. He's being represented by lawyer legislator Margie Bright Matthews.
Shocker.
Mhm.
Okay. So we know about sort of the context of what happened, where it took place. There was an altercation between different individuals at this party. Shots ring out.
Right.
4 people dead on the scene. 16 hospitalized with gunshot wounds. Let's talk a little bit about the other bigger picture. Jim, we talked a little bit about the gang violence and the drug ties in this area, but the other big picture was raised by Beaufort County Sheriff P.J. Tanner as he discussed the investigation his agency is leading into this shooting. And he talked about the types of weapons
Mhm.
and really kind of keyed in on that. Tell us a little bit about that, Jen.
So apparently, this is it's become a huge problem not only in Beaufort County but throughout the state of South Carolina, where they are seeing a lot of guns. There, I think they call them switch guns, where they are modified aftermarket to make them automatic. Um, and he said in the past year alone, they've had 24 arrests of individuals with those types of automatic guns. And the big problem is most of those were released on bond. And why don't we take a look at what he had to say about that?
We've got a problem in Beaufort County. And this problem is just it didn't pop up Saturday night, Sunday morning. And in a lot of things, it kind of gets lost in translation. Not only, and I'm not blaming the media or anyone else, but in the past year and a half, Beaufort County Sheriff's Office has made 24 arrests on possession of machine guns. 24 in a year and a half. 6 are still in jail. 18 are out on bond. A bond that you would laugh at. And it's not funny. A bond that allows those that we have been dealing with for years, and we chase them every week, every weekend, that are out on bond for possession of a machine gun. No one should possess a machine gun.
So that is Beaufort County Sheriff P.J. Tanner weighing in on some of the issues that he believes were the root causes of this
Right.
tragedy. I watched that entire press conference. I was also struck by the fact he's talking about, we have all these measures that are ostensibly to keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. Yet, as you obviously see, he is referring specifically to people who are obtaining weapons through the black market, through nefarious channels. And that's one of the things, Jen, every time I hear about this end gun violence and crackdown on gun rights, I think about this. Well, if it can't keep you
Right.
can't keep them out of the hands of these folks. One thing I do want to point out, though, as we look at this, folks who have investigated violent crimes in South Carolina continually point to the need for federal authorities, and I think Brian Sterling, the new U.S. Attorney, is doing a good job of this, to really crack down on felon in possession.
Right.
Because if you are a convicted felon and you're out there with a firearm, that's automatic. 5 years, boom.
Right.
So that's an easy way to start cracking down on some of this violent crime and keep some of the people who are repeat offenders, first of all, keep guns out of their hand, create a disincentive to that, but also in the event they do obtain weapons illegally, get them off the streets.
Exactly. And like Sheriff Tanner said, if you have a machine gun, you do not need to be back out on the street. I mean,
Yeah.
it's frightening, and it's, one of the continues that conversation that we keep having about these violent criminals who are getting back out on bond or getting these reduced sentences. So I mean, I do think it paints a bigger picture of, problems throughout South Carolina that we've been addressing.
Well, and he's not the only sheriff sounding this alarm. Leon Lott in Richland County has decried the catch and release nature of our judicial system for many years. Just last week, you and I were up in York County listening to Sheriff Breeden up there praise Solicitor Kevin Brackett and Solicitor David Pasco for their efforts to try to get lawmakers to pass tougher uh, tougher sentencing, to reform the way we pick judges. I mean, this is something we've been talking about the problems for years,
Right.
and yet we continue to see the consequences of our leaders' failure to address them.
Right. I mean, we have got there have got to be changes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Steve Federico, who's become a new voice in the push for change, his daughter Logan Federico was murdered in May, and he's been speaking out about the issues that caused her murder, alleged murderer, to be out on the streets. And it's you keep telling these stories over and over again. You
Yeah.
hear politicians speak up and say we need to crack down on violent crime. What are you going to do? All
Yeah.
right, let's put some action behind your words.
Yeah. We had the Lieutenant Governor of the state of South Carolina, in fact, on our website this week, published an exclusive op-ed outlining her proposals for fixing the system. But I think you're right, Jim. We keep hearing this, but we're always asking the question: how many more dead bodies is it going to take before people figure it out? Yet we keep asking that question over and over. So
Right.
clearly, the lesson not being learned.
Yeah, so we look at little things like, well, not little, but the non-fatal strangulation law. One of the biggest indicators for potential mass shootings is prior non-fatal strangulation history.
Hmm.
So I mean, there are a lot of things tied into the legislation that we need to get passed in this state.
Right. And obviously, you're referring to South Carolina being the only state that doesn't have a standalone non fatal strangulation law. Obviously, that's something lawmakers need to get on, along with all these other judicial systemic issues that we've been talking about. But Jen, excellent reporting on the St. Helena. Keep us up to speed. Obviously, we're looking for some news on the direction of that investigation in the
Right. Sounds
coming
like they
days.
have a lot of forensic evidence being examined by the FBI, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, and they have opened up a tip line at the FBI for tips to come in. They've got 700 witnesses, and none
Nobody
of
saw
them,
anything.
nobody saw
Funny how that
anything.
works, isn't it?
It is. It is very funny. So they're hoping that if they have these anonymous tip lines, people will start speaking up.
Yeah, seems like that's always the case. You have all these witnesses, but everyone's afraid to talk because if you're going to implicate a powerful gang member or gang leader,
Hmm.
you never know. And in fact, we've seen here in South Carolina powerful gang leaders who've been sentenced to life in prison because of their connections with lawyer legislators and solicitors who aren't keeping their eye on the ball, and retiring judges who appointed by those lawyer legislators. Guess what? They get let out. We covered that extensively with the case of Jared Price, which, by the way, that's going to be back in the news, folks. Watch for that incoming editions. That case is not going away. There's going to be some consequences from that case. But, Jen, I want to switch gears with you now. We've covered so much this week on the St. Helena story, but I want to shift gears now to a huge story that, again, our national true crime audience may look at this one and yawn a little bit or fast forward a little bit here, but this is something hugely important if you're talking about state of South Carolina. But if you're a parent who's sending your kid to college, these huge checks that you cut to send your kids to college, you want to know that the institutions you send your kids to are acting in their best interest, that decisions that those trustees, presidents of these schools, um, the decisions they're making are in the best interest of those kids and the institutions, not their own pocketbooks, not their own bottom line. But we've uncovered a scandal up in Clemson where there's one local official up there who is leading a crusade to expose what he believes is corruption on the part of some luminaries at Clemson University, where your daughter attends school.
Yep.
Grace, shout out to Grace. But Jen, walk us through what's happening at Clemson. What's this scandal about, and who is the voice that's driving it?
So the scandal up in Clemson, if we're looking at power and privilege in South Carolina, it's a key example of how this happens. But a Oconee County development proposal popped up, and one of the Oconee County council members, Matthew Durham, I believe I got that name right, started digging into this 5,200 house development that they wanted to put on this huge piece of property, and realized that it had some interesting connections to two of Clemson's trustees and the president of Clemson. So he really dug into it and started doing some blogs. And I started looking at the property records and looking at what he had found. And
Pretty good researcher, isn't he?
yeah, I was he could put me out of a job. What Durham has uncovered is a series of land transactions that seemingly tie back to a company called United Homes Group. This is a large home builder throughout the Southeast. They've got developments all over South Carolina. This property was a 5,200 home project, which is it would have been a huge development for this area, including some Clemson tied some properties when he found the development plan. Some areas of the property tied to Clemson. Now, the interesting thing about United Homes Group is the CEO is Michael Neary, who is a huge um, donor to Clemson. And on the board of United Homes Group is none other than former governor and Clemson
Why do you
trust.
say it to me like that,
Yeah,
Jen? Come
you
on
know why
now.
I'm saying it to you like that. Former governor and Clemson trustee Nikki Haley and the Clemson president
Jim
Jim
Clements,
Clements.
yeah.
So these individuals sit on the board of directors for this company.
But Clemson is and it's a very carefully worded denial. They have said, yes, they're on the board, but they have no financial ties
Right.
to this project. I guess the key word there would be yet, though, because hasn't this company used holding companies in the past to secure land for developments.
Yes,
And this guy, Durham, has found a ton of connections between those companies and these same people.
exactly. And, they may not have any, if they do switch this property over to United Homes Group for development, if United Homes Group does go in and do the building, Nikki Haley on one of her financial statements when she was running for president, she owns a ton of United Homes Group stock. So yeah,
Yeah.
they do they do have. I mean, that how do you it is what it is.
When he's pulled records also showing linkages between the developer who was involved in this Carolina Panthers disaster. For those of you unfamiliar with that, FITSNews covered it extensively back in 2019 when the Carolina Panthers were supposed to locate their practice facility and their corporate headquarters in Rock Hill. David Tepper, the owner of the team, abandoned that deal after the state of South Carolina put down tens of millions of dollars for new infrastructure and all sorts of other incentives. Just an absolute disaster of a deal. But that's the same guy
Yeah,
tied to this deal.
exactly. So Durham also dug into another area near Clemson where that they're developing in Pendleton, which is in Anderson County. I'm maybe 20 minutes from Clemson, and they were proposing a not 5,200 housing development, but a larger housing development in Pendleton using tax incentive funding. Um, it's the exact same scheme.
Cast of characters,
Yeah,
right?
cast of
Yeah.
characters, individuals, property purchase. So yeah, I mean they are pushing for development around Clemson, which there's a lot of land there. It's beautiful up there. That's part of the reason why it's not developed. It is rural. It's great.
Yeah, and a lot of folks who live up there are not happy with these
No,
developments. And in fact, one of the things we neglected to point out that 5,200 home development in Oconee County, there are specific local zoning regulations that prohibit that. But the developer, this guy that was mixed up in the Panthers debacle, according to Durham, sent some letters, or a letter anyway, to local government basically threatening them,
right.
saying we're going to run a political media campaign against you and get lawyers involved if you don't do what we want.
Which is basically the same thing he did in the Panthers
Yeah,
thing in Rock Hill.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean it is. Yeah, it's really interesting right now. Oconee County Council has denied approval of this development. I think the Pendleton one is still under consideration.
And they got
So
one in the city of Clemson that's been approved or
right,
received initial approval.
right.
So this is all over the place
Right,
up there.
it really is.
Well, Jen, you've done an amazing job digging on this thing, and also credit to Matthew Durham for standing up for his constituents on this issue. Clemson has been in the news a bunch this fall, Jen. The freedom of speech issues, the Charlie Kirk assassination, several of its professors fired in response to that, and the board up there caught a lot of grief from South Carolina politicians for failing to act quickly.
And now they're facing a federal lawsuit related to that.
They are indeed, but the bigger issue, and I want to remind our audience of this, South Carolina's Constitution has an explicit ban against people holding offices for life. You cannot have a lifetime appointment to a government job here in South Carolina. It's unconstitutional. 7 of Clemson's board members are lifetime appointments, folks, and they get to pick their own replacement. Think about that. A majority of the governing board at Clemson University filled by unconstitutional lifetime appointees, and one of them, Nikki Haley, which Jen is looking at me funny again. Jen, come on. Excellent work on this story, Jen. Let's keep it up and keep the pressure on them. And again, if you've got a tip related to Clemson University or any institution of higher learning that you think is involved in double dealing or self-dealing or a scandal like this, please let Jen and I know. You can hit us up, w@fitsnews.com. That's me. And Jen, Jenn, @fitsnews.com. That's Jenny. So after taking down one of South Carolina's most powerful entrenched sheriffs, we gave Andy Fancher a break from Badges Gone Bad this week, and we put him on the reality TV arrest beat. A little bit of a departure for you, Fancher.
It's definitely a change in pace. That's not to say that Chuck Wright isn't, here in heart and spirit, but
Always with us in spirit.
always with us here at FITSNews. But correct, yeah, we reported on the arrest of Ron Rallis, yet another incarceration.
Now, you said a moment ago when we were getting ready to film the segment that you were late to this party, but what a party it is. Am I right? I mean, this guy's life is just like nonstop
I mean, ever since 2022, when he became a celebrity in his own right for accusing sitting Congressman William Timmons of having an affair with his estranged wife, right? He hasn't stopped making headlines since you reported, since you created this beast that is Ron Rallis, right? He's landed in handcuffs at least 4 times, and this month was no exception.
Yeah, and obviously we reported earlier this summer on a major arrest involving Rallis in California. Some serious allegations there, but his arrest in South Carolina this month. Andy Fancher, walk us through exactly what happened with Ron Rallis' latest arrest.
Sure, we're not talking about this arrest. We're not talking about this arrest. We're talking about this arrest. His second DUI, so he officially has a mugshot on file at the Sheriff Alcana Detention Center, his second such mugshot that we're aware of. And while some police departments, not mentioning any names, town of Central, does not respond to our requests for comment, the same cannot be said about the Folly Beach Department of Public Safety. Within 24 hours, they provided us one of the more hilarious incident reports that I've ever read here at FITSNews. It's as if the officer knew that we might be requesting this incident report. So,
It's like a Southern Charm screenplay, right?
well, I mean, he was courted to be on reality TV and he declined the offer, right? So, yes, as if we're reading an incident report from Southern Charm here. On the evening of October 8th, 2025, Ron Rallis, per this incident report, slams into the back of a Jeep. So law enforcement arrives on scene, and in the first observations from this officer, I mean, I'm not making any accusations, but skipping through this incident report, we've got slurred speech, odor of alcohol, very disoriented, lack of awareness, consistent with signs of impairment, eyes watery and bloodshot. So, the signs were there that maybe something was off kilter. So what this officer notes in their incident report is that I asked the driver where he was coming from, and he asked his daughter, who was seated in the vehicle with him. She said, from dinner. Now, this is where the music on the Titanic stops. It only goes downhill from here. I asked him what happened. He told me nothing. Absolutely nothing. It was just a wreck. I asked him what direction he was coming from, and he told me I was going straight.
Oh, wow.
So obviously handling this traffic stop very well. And I mean, we could keep on going. I mean, this is the 3 pages of greatness here. The officer notes that he requests the vehicle documentation not once, not twice, but thrice. On the 3rd time, when I asked again for his documents and told him I had instructed him several times to retrieve them for me, he replied, "My friend, that's the first time you have asked."
It's like the cock crowing 3 times, man. What the hell?
What the hell,
crazy.
indeed. So, obviously, this rises to the level of asking Rallis whether or not he's willing to participate in a standard field sobriety test. Rallis not only declines, he says, quote, "I'm absolutely not doing that. Zero chance of me doing that." And when I advised the subject that he was under arrest, this was 25 minutes later. So just 25, not even 30 minutes after the officer arrived on scene, we're now effectuating an arrest. He began to resist by pulling his arms forward and yelling, "Wait, wait." So that interstage right a second charge, resisting arrest. And after they serve a notice of suspension on his driver's license for a second time since 2022, and they book him, they then serve a third charge on him, which is child endangerment, because as we noted earlier, he had his 4-year-old child in his pickup truck with him. So this is the story that never ends, which is Ron Rallis. I, of course, Dylan and I both, I've met him. I've spoken with him. We've messaged each other about law enforcement in the past, and I hit him up after this arrest. Last I checked, he hasn't even opened that message. So obviously that door will remain open for him, but this is where we're at.
Yeah. Wow. And it's interesting because this is a guy who, during the Timmons saga, I think a lot of people really related to him.
Mm-hmm.
He was somebody who was the aggrieved party, I guess, in that interpersonal drama. He certainly milked it for all it was worth, all the
Mhm.
attention that could be drawn from that. He certainly maximized it, painted a church up in Greenville pink.
Right.
The Trap Church, the infamous Trap Church, gave an exclusive interview to us in that building. And a lot of people really felt for him. They felt, okay, this guy's been wronged, a powerful politician using the system against him. He'd spent an extended period of time in that Greenville County Detention Center, 3 months
Right.
behind bars on a contempt of court charge. So I think a lot of people really felt for him, but now we're looking at 2 DUI arrests in the last few months. We've got this incident in California where he was
Domestic. Yeah.
accused of punching a
Mhm.
girl, breaking her jaw,
Right.
if reports are to be believed, and certainly innocent until proven guilty on all these allegations. So we're waiting to see how they're adjudicated. But I think the bloom is off the rose with Ron Rallis when it comes to folks kind of feeling sorry for him. At this point, it's kind of like, hey, man, grow up.
I mean, I commend him for bringing as much attention as he did, not only to that congressional race where Timmons won nonetheless, but to the family court system here in South Carolina. As we're abundantly familiar, family court does not favor a male, certainly a single male in this situation that he found himself in. So, like you said, the bloom's off the rose on this one.
Yeah, and it's hard to argue at this point now. The system's treating me unfairly regarding a family court matter when you got your 5-year-old kid in the back, not only allegedly driving drunk, but then relying on the 5-year-old kid to give answers to police officers about where you were. It's just crazy.
Doesn't look too good.
It doesn't look too good. Well, Andy, man, I appreciate you taking a break from the Badge Gone Bad beat and focusing on this for us, but you've got some stuff in the hopper, if I'm not mistaken, on Badges
Hey,
Gone
just
Bad?
because we took a break from Badges Gone Bad this week doesn't mean that we've got multiple irons in the fire. It appears as though we have kicked open Pandora's box in South Congaree. We've got a retiring police chief. We had reported on him earlier this week involving an alleged body-worn camera video. I certainly encourage folks to go check that article out, but it appears as though that's not even the tip of the iceberg in what fellow law enforcement officers have told me was just a little fiefdom.
Wow.
Some of these stories coming out of South Congaree are just wild. We're also looking at a specific deputy in York County, another Midlands County Sheriff's Office. We reported just recently on the sheriff, or the previous sheriff of York County, getting arrested for fleeing the scene of an incident. Also drafting up a report as we speak on North Charleston's hero cop that appears to have been terminated just recently after it appears as though he might, just maybe, might have been abusing police technology. But hey, it happens to the best of us hero cops that have been awarded and commemorated by folks as high as Governor Henry McMaster himself. So these are just a few of the individuals on my dashboard. But Badges Gone Bad does not appear to be going anywhere, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, it seemed like you got a steady supply here in South Carolina, man. But as always, Andy, great work, and I appreciate you jumping on this story for us and chronicling the latest in the saga of Ron Rallis. So if you've followed FITSNews over the last few weeks, you're no doubt familiar with the still unfolding unspooling saga of the South Carolina Election Commission, SC Votes, the agency which oversees access to the polls here in the Palmetto State. Well, this week, that saga jumped to a much higher energy level when the commission, which responsible for that agency, held an open committee hearing in downtown Columbia, South Carolina, where they addressed head-on the allegations that led to the ouster of the former director of that agency, his deputy, and another employee regarding all sorts of alleged misconduct. I'm joined by Dylan Nolan, our director of special projects, the producer of this show, who joined me in downtown Columbia for this meeting. Dylan, we heard former U.S. Circuit Court Judge Dennis Shedd, who is the head commissioner over at SC Votes, lay out a damning indictment of the former executive director of that agency, Howie Knapp. Now, FITSNews has exclusively reported on Knapp's downfall since his firing last month, but boy, these allegations from Judge Shedd, he came out hot in laying down the charges against Knapp.
Yeah, I mean, I've covered plenty of board meetings like this, and rarely does the chairman of the board look past the other members of the board straight to the press and say, "What would you like to know?" and begin fielding questions from the press in the middle of a board meeting like this. But it was clear that he had prepared a couple minutes of commentary on the situation to clarify why they took the actions that they did. And as you say, he pulled no punches. Let's roll the tape.
The former executive director, Mr. Knapp, was removed because of his inappropriate conduct. There are a litany of things that Howard Knapp had done that the commission had become aware of. His use or misuse of agency funds for personal reasons, his conspiring with other management level staffers to falsify documentation the commission was seeking, and conspiring with those staffers to lie about the fact they had falsified that documentation. By the way, and the falsification and the agreement to lie about that was all admitted by Mr. Knapp and those other staffers. This agency, we found out, had become a toxic and perhaps a hostile work environment under his leadership. And quite frankly, based on what I've read in press reports, some of the reporting done by some people in this room, if that actually happened here, and I have no reason to say it didn't happen here, Knapp turned the office into even worse things. He also, I believe, misled the commission on contract matters he asked us to approve. Now, since his dismissal, we have learned of additional misconduct and further details about the misconduct we already knew about. He and his very close friend and fellow employee, Paige Solanich, were involved in planning a device in this very room to record our confidential meeting that we had at our last session when we were talking about how we were going to explore what we heard, what we had learned about Mr. Knapp's conduct. But they actually secretly planted a recording device in this room to capture what we were saying in that confidential meeting. And in a few minutes, as I said, we're going to hear from the state treasurer on issues regarding, I call it a questionable contract that Knapp signed for the agency. Now, I'm aware that 3 other state authorities, SLED, the Attorney General, and the Inspector General, they have Knapp or agency conduct which occurred under his time here under review. And I want to be clear about this. The commission's position on the DOJ request for the voter list was not a factor in his firing. He admitted in front of us that we were interested in following the law and protecting the private information of South Carolina voters. Because of everything we now know about Mr. Knapp, I am sure that a vote to remove him, if we were to take it today, would have more support, and I believe would probably be unanimous.
So, Dylan, it obviously wasn't just Howie Knapp and Deputy Director Paige Solanich, but another employee, the former spokesperson of that agency, resigned, I guess. I think they allowed that third employee to resign, but it was very interesting. Judge Shedd, in his remarks, noted that all of them admitted to this conduct, which I think is pretty critical as this thing moves forward. But what struck me as bizarre, we heard that litany of allegations, and we've obviously covered some of the other salacious components to the allegations involving Knapp and the deputy director. But there was this other matter regarding the election machines, the contract to procure new election machines, and $4 million apparently kind of hanging out there. What did you make of those allegations?
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a mess left for the board to clean up, as they had empowered Howie Knapp to purchase election machines. They, gave them the authority to sign a contract, and it seems as though there was a discrepancy somewhere in the range of $4 million between what the board wanted him to pay for them and what he actually paid for them. I understand that they're in a position now where they're like, we didn't want to pay that much for that, but also when you empower somebody to sign a contract, it kind of leaves you up a creek when they sign a contract you don't like.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. Judge Shedd went to each one of the board members there, asking them individually, did you get the $32 million figure, the higher figure for these machines? Each one of them individually answered no. He also pointed out that none of the paperwork tied to that contract was ever presented to members of the board, which I think is a pretty curious development. The other thing, Dylan, it's not just the amount of money here that we're talking about, and it's not just whether or not this was done with or without proper authorization, but the funding source itself is of significant concern here, because there are allegations that Knapp misled his commission about legislative intent to fund these things, basically telling them, hey, we got a blank check from the legislature, it's no problem. That turned out not to be true.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing when you empower somebody to sign a contract if they are being honest and saying, I have the funding to execute this. if they're not being honest, and now you're in a position where, okay, you've had these third parties who have outlaid their equipment, well, you better pay them. But if you were in a position where you were told, we're going to have the funding lined up, well, what do you do when you, other than just be left scrambling and decide, well, am I going to short the people who I owe the money to, or are we going to figure out ways to get this money and pay them? That's now the position that they're unfortunately in.
Well, it was also interesting, Judge Shedd's remarks, you mentioned it a moment ago, just unprecedented
Yeah.
transparency and access to the press.
Which I really appreciated as a member of the media. I mean, when you have an absolute train wreck like this, running towards the fire is the correct way to address it, but by being transparent and saying, this is what we know, this is what we've done, and this is why we did it. So I respect the way that he handled that.
No, absolutely. It was something no one was really expecting in the media. And it's also ironic because this is an agency that just that week, the Charleston Post and Courier accused them of being the exact opposite, accused them of conducting their deliberations in secret and of hiding things from the public. And in fact, Judge Shedd took specific umbrage with one media outlet regarding
The
that
Charleston
criticism.
Post and Courier, which is quite unfortunate. Nick Reynolds, the reporter who was there, for folks who don't understand how newsrooms operate, you'll have the editorial side, and this is in big newspapers, and then you'll have your news side. And these two halves don't communicate very much, ideally, so that you don't have your bias of your opinion section coming into your news coverage. Well, let's just say the folks that write the opinion pieces at the Post and Courier have horrific opinions, the worst opinions. They're terrible. Nick Reynolds, on the other hand, and a lot of other people who I meet covering news stories all the time, are impartial reporters who are just out there doing their best. And the judge was just giving him a hard time over some admittedly ridiculously stupid things which were published in the opinion section. But Nick took it like a champ. He water off a duck's back. So that was a pretty interesting interaction to watch, though.
Yeah, Dylan, and hearing that exchange, it really felt like the editorial board got out over its skis, didn't it?
Yeah, this is not the first time I've actually written about them doing this exact same thing before, where one of their own reporters was doing great work during the George Floyd protests down on King Street in Charleston. She was in the Hall's Chop House and reporting on gunfire going down around the area, which was why all these people were sheltering in the Hall's Chop House restaurant. Now, you read the opinion piece about that incident, and they're talking about how it was peaceful and there was no destruction, and it's like, this is literally your own reporter. You guys work in the same office. You are completely countervailing the facts that your own person is reporting. So yes, the dissociation in that newsroom between the editorial and the news, perhaps they need a little bit more crosstalk.
That's right. The left hand doesn't know what the far left hand is doing, Dylan.
Yeah.
As this story moves forward, though, obviously the Election Commission, as you mentioned, has a huge mess to clean up. And I think your advice is excellent. Run into the fire. But we have got 4 special elections coming up this month, starting this month. We've got municipal elections coming up early next month. We've got partisan primary races June of next year. This is something we got to get right, Dylan. It's something that the public relies on the integrity of this agency. Let me ask you this. The current approach by Judge Shedd, by the new leadership over there, you think that they're going to be successful in restoring public faith in the integrity of our elections?
The good thing is that none of the conduct that I've heard about, I mean, look, I have no faith in the bureaucrats and the morons that get appointed by these political hacks to run our state agencies, but none of the screwing around that we've heard about actually has impacted our elections. So
Literal screwing around.
Yes, very literal screwing around. So look, am I thrilled that the government, takes my money whether I like it or not, and then pays these bozos to be having sexual intercourse on work time allegedly? No, of course I'm not thrilled about that. I would rather not pay for that. But do I think that when I show up to the polling place that what those idiots were allegedly doing is going to impact the election? No. So my confidence is not really shaken in the actual outcome of our elections by this whole affair.
Indeed. And Judge Shedd was very clear in his remarks to the media and to all those in attendance at this gathering, including State Treasurer Curtis Loftus and the State Inspector General, who also attended that meeting. Very clear that none of these allegations involved any sort of election-related issues. And he was also very clear to point out that none of the issues involved the ongoing debate over what sort of access South Carolina's Election Commission should provide the administration of Donald Trump regarding our voter list and our voter file. He was very clear to make sure it was not related to that in any way.
Yes, he certainly wanted to draw that bright line of making it clear that it was about the conduct and the misconduct and not about that pending litigation.
Indeed. Well, folks, this story broke on FITSNews. We have reported every major development as it has continued to unfold. Be on the lookout. In the very near future, we are told that several of the investigations into former SC Votes Director Howie Knapp are coming to a head. 2 state law enforcement division criminal investigations, an inspector general investigation, and obviously the ongoing internal review by that agency. So there's a lot still to come from the SC Votes scandal. Keep it tuned to FITSNews for the very latest on those developments. All right, folks, that's a wrap for a big edition of our Week in Review. But if you don't already follow FITSNews.com, we don't even scratch the surface on this show of all the stories that we cover on our website. Please visit FITSNews.com. A ton of big coverage this week. We had an update on a big investigation in Williamsburg County, new defendants, new charges in a major public corruption probe there. Also, the very latest on the contentious abortion debate in South Carolina, a total ban advancing through the legislature. Again, if you haven't checked out FITSNews.com, a ton of additional coverage there. All the stories we've been working on, which, by the way, are powered by your support. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to FITSNews.com. We'll catch you next time on the Week in Review.